Welcome in. It is week 2, matchups that matter. Today we're going through all the games minus Thursday Night Football, and we're breaking down everything from over-unders, implied point totals, pace of play, DVOA matchups, and of course, who you should be starting, sitting, flexing, all that good stuff. Let's get it kicked off with the 1 p.m. slate. I believe we have 8 1 p.m. games and 3 4 p.m. games, and then we also have a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. East Coast unks are going to be down bad like myself when the Chargers and Raiders don't kick off until 10 p.m. Eastern, which is usually about the time I'm winding down to go to sleep. But let's get it kicked off with Baltimore hosting the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens are favored by 11.5 points. This total actually opened at 12.5. Some people are kind of taking the points on the Cleveland side of things. Over-under set at 45. Cleveland, they throw the ball. They can put up points on their own end as well. But I do think a lot of us expect this to be a heavy dose of the big dog. Lamar Jackson probably getting it done in the first half and maybe coasting to a win in half 2. But you never know with divisional games, especially in the AFC North. They can be kind of rough and tumble at times. Pace of play is supposed to be pretty high for this game. Combined pace of the 5th highest total on the slate. The DVOA matchups also both top 15. Ravens defense kind of got exposed by the Bills, but it's also the Bills. We'll see what the Browns look like in this matchup. But yeah, really, really interesting game environment. Sitting Joe Flacco, obviously, because no one's starting him, but he does have a good matchup for like DFS purposes if you're interested in tournament stuff. Cleveland's defense as a pass unit is actually pretty decent. It was pretty decent in week 1. Of course, against Joe Burrow, they held him to a nice low total. Both running backs are going to have rough and tumble matchups on the ground. Both defenses are pretty good at stopping the run. So Dylan Sampson and, Jerome Ford and whoever on the ground for the Browns maybe need to get it done through the passing game, which makes Dylan Sampson obviously very, very relevant the way that he's there. And then the Derrick Henry of it all. I mean, I think a lot of people, like I just said, are expecting the Ravens to absolutely wallop the Browns, Derrick Henry to probably rush for 150 plus yards. But if he's having a tough time on the ground, maybe they got to play this game through the passing game. Zay Flowers has a really nice matchup. So Flowers breakout has been on my radar. You guys know I was big on Zay Flowers before the draft, before fantasy football drafts. And Zay Flowers has the 29th ranked Cleveland pass defense. So even though Lamar is probably, not going to have the best matchup, there is a matchup to exploit here with Zay Flowers. And also with Mark Andrews, he has the 25th tight end defense in DVOA and adjusted fantasy points allowed combined there. So could be an easy matchup for those pass catchers on Baltimore. Make sure you start both of those guys. I know Andrews wasn't great last week, but I'm very comfortable firing him up again. Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman have nice matchups, and this is going to be a good game script for them. If you need a flex option, I think both of them are definitely very solid. A lot of people probably spent a lot of fab on Harold Fannin this week. And I think the way that he was used in week 1 really means to me that Njoku and Fannin are both probably going to be staple top 15 tight ends in my rankings going forward if this usage continues. Now, was it a fluke? Was it a one-off? Is this Isaiah Likely from last year where he just randomly had really great usage? We'll have to wait and see. But if you have to flex or stream Harold Fannin right off the waiver wire because you lost George Kittle or Bowers is not practicing or Evan Ingram was dealing with an injury, although he's back at practice right now, I think Harold Fannin's a decent option, as is David Njoku. If you need a defense, Baltimore's defense, very good matchup for them, as does their kicker have a nice matchup. So moving into the next game, we have the Bengals hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Bengals are 3.5 point favorites in this one. Over-under is the highest on the slate, 48.5 points. The under is catching some of the steam right now. The Bengals offense didn't look great in week 1. The Jaguars offense sputtered at times, but both were really weird game environments. You got a rough and tumble AFC North game on one side, and then you have the weather-delayed Jacksonville-Carolina game last week. So I really don't know if we know what these offenses are yet, but we might find out in this game because the over-under, Vegas is not really in the business of losing money, and it's set pretty high. Pace of play about average. DVOA matchups, again, it's a 1-week sample size. For this DVOA stuff, I wouldn't read too much into it this week just because it's only a 1-game sample size. By week 4, week 5, we should have better data points on how good the offenses are, how good the opposing defenses are. So just keep that in mind this entire video. Joe Burrow versus the Jacksonville pass defense is a get-right spot. You got to put up a good game in this one. The Bengals have started slow the last couple of years. Jamar Chase needs a bounce back. T. Higgins needs a bounce back, and I think they will get it in this matchup. On the other side of things, you have Trevor Lawrence, also a pretty decent streaming kind of quarterback option off the waiver wire or just a good top 15 option in my rankings. And then, of course, BTJ, Travis Hunter, Both of them looked like they were knocking some rust off in week one. Obviously, a weird game environment, like I said, weather delays on and off in that Carolina game. Travis got great usage. He played 30, I believe, of the 33 total passing plays. We did hear reports that he might be more used on defense, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be used less on offense, because if the Bengals put up points in this game, they're going to need Travis Hunter out there. BTJ, need a bounce back game from him, of course. And then both running backs in above average matchups. I think if you guys are looking for running back help, I'm buying high on Travis Etienne after the Tank Bigsby trade. I think he's legitimately going to be a top 15 running back rest of the season. So definitely send out some offers for him. We talked about that in yesterday's video. And Chase Brown found the end zone, but overall didn't have a great day against Cleveland. So keep that in mind if you're looking for another kind of mid RB1 target to go up and trade up for. Let's say you had guy who had a good game in week one. Let's say James Cook, for example. And then you also have J.K. Dobbins on your bench. Can both of those guys get you up to Chase Brown? That's what I'd be looking to do. And then if you're looking for a streaming tight end, I think Brenton Strange is a great option in this game. Like I said, highest over-under on the slate. And then Evan McPherson, if you're looking for a kicker, also makes some sense. I would not start either of the defenses in this matchup. New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys -6 implied points here, favoring Dallas for sure. Dallas does usually put a hurt on the New York Giants just historically. The last couple of years, they've really beaten up on them. Over under of 44.5 points. The under catching some steam right now. The pace of play is very high combined between the two teams. They run very up-tempo, so should be a lot of offensive plays in this game. Dallas's DVOA versus the Giants' defensive DVOA. Again, 1 week sample size, but looks like a really good matchup for the Cowboys on offense, so I'd be starting up every single player that you can on the Cowboys. Stream Dak Prescott. He's got about a league average matchup. Start Javonte Williams. He's a top 24 running back for me this week, given that he was a 75+% snap share guy. Then you also have CeeDee Lamb, of course, who's in your lineup every week, but George Pickens too. Did have not a great week against Philadelphia last week, but I do think this will be a get-right game for him. And then on the Giants side of things, Trayvon Diggs is expected to shadow cover Malik Neighbors. There is no Deron Bland in this game, the other starting Cowboys cornerback. He is dealing with an injury. So Malik Neighbors probably going to have Trayvon Diggs on him for the most part the entire game. If you really needed a low-end flex play, I think Wan'Dale Robinson, not a terrible option. Tyrone Tracy, let's see the efficiency come back, because last week we loved the workload, but he did not have a great game overall. The Giants, we'll see if Andrew Thomas is back for this game, but if he is out, I would say downgrade your expectations for Tyrone Tracy. He probably moves from like a low-end RB2 if Thomas is playing to like a high-end RB3. Top 30-ish type option, and definitely not a must start if Andrew Thomas isn't out there. And then if you're looking for streamers, Jake Ferguson, a great option if you need a tight end, especially if you lost some of those guys. I think Jake Ferguson probably dropped in a couple of leagues, myself included. I actually dropped him in one league. And then Dallas defense and kicker, definitely going to be in play for the week. Moving into the Bears going to Detroit to face the Lions, a pissed off Detroit Lions team that got embarrassed by the Packers. I don't think that the Bears defense is nearly as good as the Packers defense, especially traveling to Detroit. So I do think we're going to see a Lions get right spot here. Fourth highest projected over under on this game. The Lions defensive DVOA or offensive DVOA versus the defense of the Bears. Again, don't read too much into that. It was a 1 game sample size. I would feel very comfortable starting pretty much everybody on Detroit. That means Gibbs, that means Montgomery, that means Jameson Williams, and that means, of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta as well. The only one I don't really feel great about is Jared Goff at this moment, because I do think Ben Johnson was really elevating the play of Jared Goff, and I also think that this is probably a get-right spot for Gibbs and Montgomery, given that Chicago is much more of a run funnel defense than they are a pass funnel defense. Keep an eye on Jalen Johnson, the cornerback, the best corner on the Bears. If he's not playing in this game, that bodes well specifically for Jameson Williams, who's more of an outside corner. I do think we'll be having a fine matchup for Amon-Ra St. Brown regardless. On the Bears side of things, this is kind of the same type of matchup for them as well. Caleb Williams ran the ball tremendously well against the Vikings. The Vikings are a very daunting defense, so the fact that he looked pretty decent in that game, had a good fantasy performance, means that he can be an every week streamer for you if he's going to run like that. Think of Caleb Williams the way that you think of Kyler Murray. That's what you need to think of Caleb Williams going forward, because they're very similar players. They run the ball about the same amount. That is what you need to think of Caleb Williams going forward. And I do think, given that this is a matchup in which the Bears are 6-point underdogs, you should probably be starting Caleb Williams in this game. That means Rome Odunze and DJ Moore are good starts as well. I would hold off on starting Colston Loveland right now until we see those routes correct themselves. We saw him only run like 40% of the routes in week one. Him and Cole Kmet and a little bit of a tight end by committee there. So definitely don't start him at the moment. Even though the Lions, as you can see there, it says they have a tough matchup. I think the Chicago defense, maybe without Jalen Johnson especially, probably not as good as the matchups indicate from last season. Moving on to the next game, we have the Patriots traveling to Miami to play the Dolphins. Now, are the Dolphins going to look like a functional NFL franchise, or are they going to look like the complete and utter floating trash bag that we saw last week against the Colts? We'll have to wait and see. If the Patriots win this game, and if you're betting this game, -1.5 for the Dolphins, I don't think they deserve to be minus anything against anybody right now. So I would probably take the Patriots to upset the Dolphins if I were betting this game. Kind of a ho-hum game environment, 43.5 points, under catching some steam. Pace of play is really slow. Not a great game environment for fantasy production. So you only really want to be starting guys who are absolute must-start players. Of course, Devon Achane on the Dolphins side, must-start player. Absolute stud running back, top 12 running back for me in my rankings this week. If you wanted to stream Tua Tagovailoa, I don't think it's a terrible spot, but I probably would stay clear of that. And then again, Tyreek and Waddle. What are they? Are they last year's Tyreek and Waddle, where we downgraded expectations for them to the point that Tyreek was a high-end wide receiver 3 on some weeks, Jalen Waddle more of a low-end flex play? Or are they going to get back to, Tyreek's a wide receiver 1 and Waddle's a wide receiver 2? I don't know if we're going to see that coming anytime soon, because the vibes are absolutely not immaculate in Miami right now. So keep an eye on Tyreek and Waddle. Again, you could flex them if you need to, but if you don't have to, I don't think they are must starts by any means. Drake May is a great streamer this week. If you are looking for a streaming quarterback, I think Drake May is a great option. The Dolphins defense looked very exploitable by Daniel Jones and the Colts last week. So if you need a streaming quarterback, Drake May is in my top 15. If you need Stephon Diggs this week, we got to see those routes correct themselves, because he was not on the field consistently. If you are desperate, you could throw Kayshon Boutte out there. I probably wouldn't. I would want to see a little bit more usage out of him. And then Hunter Henry, a great streaming tight end option. This game also screams lots of field goals to me. So if you want to stream either kicker, I do think that both of those are viable. And like I said, if you want to stream a defense, Dolphins defense stinks. I wouldn't be opposed to streaming the Patriots defense, even though they're actually a road underdog. That's not really a good, process play for streaming defenses, but I just do have a feeling they might end up winning this game and holding the Dolphins, and the Dolphins might have conversations about firing their head coach after this one. So 49ers going to New Orleans without Brock Purdy. So this game, gross game environment. Over under set 40.5 right now, might even drop lower than this going into the actual Sunday main slate. It wouldn't shock me if this is 38, 39 points, given that Brock Purdy is not expected to play. 49ers are 3-point road underdogs. I don't actually think that they're probably going to win this game, to be honest with you. I would take the points for sure on New Orleans if I were betting it. In this game, you're not starting either of the quarterbacks, Mac Jones or Spencer Rattler. The only must-starts really are the running backs. Christian McCaffrey, New Orleans Saints defense, bottom 5 against the run, and McCaffrey scored, 25 fantasy points without a touchdown last week. I think Mac Jones is going to rely on him heavily out of the backfield, especially with no George Kittle. Alvin Kamara, because he gets the receiving targets as well, every week must start, even though it's a league average matchup for him. And the only real other guys that make sense as starters, Chris Olave had 13 targets last week, and he was a top 10 receiver in expected fantasy points at the wide receiver position. So he needs to be in your lineup, because Rattler was dropping back a lot. They threw the ball, 40-something times last week. So definitely feel good about starting Chris Olave, assuming he is healthy and has no issues there. And then Ricky Pearsall, because George Kittle is out, because Juwan Jennings is coming into this game, if he even plays at all, banged up, I think Ricky Pearsall is definitely a startable option, and I do think that both defenses are in play. Both of them are top 12 defenses in my rankings. If I had to pick one, I would actually pick New Orleans, because Mac Jones is prone to throwing some pick sixes and that kind of thing. And even though they're an underdog, I do think the home team is actually probably more likely to win this game. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in that one. Not a very fantasy relevant game overall, though, unless you like kicker and defense play. Buffalo Bills and New York Jets. This one I'm really excited for. The Jets, home underdogs of 6.5 points. We saw the Bills look like absolute freak show type of offensive production against the Ravens, especially in that fourth quarter. Over-under set at 46.5 points. The under catching some steam right now. 28.2 combined pace of play. The Jets' DVOA advantage of their offense versus the Bills' defense is the best on the slate. Again, one game sample size, and the Bills' defense played the Ravens last week. But it does look like we might get another great game out of Justin Fields. And he is a top 8 quarterback in my rankings. So I actually really like him if you picked him up off of waivers, or maybe you were rostering him already. As a great start this week, you have Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix, some of those guys. I would start Justin Fields over him, over those dudes, because other than really like Mahomes, Burrow, and up at quarterback, I think that Justin Fields might be the next best option this week, given the game environment. Going to need to throw the ball, probably going to run the ball well against the Buffalo Bills. Breece Hall against this run defense has notoriously done very well against them. They're at bottom of the NFL, literally dead last in the league run defense. We saw what Derrick Henry did to them. So Justin Fields, Breece Hall should be able to run the ball at an exceptional efficiency clip this week. James Cook against the Jets run defense. They're about a league average run defense. He should be just fine, assuming he's healthy. He did pop up on the injury report on Wednesday, but it looks like he's okay. Two shadow matchups that we have to monitor here. Sauce Gardner on Keon Coleman. I think that the glass of this mirage of Keon Coleman is going to get shattered this week when he probably doesn't have a great game. If he does have another great game, I'd be very impressed, and I'll adjust my tune on Keon Coleman a little bit. I talked about him on wide receiver trade targets video on Wednesday, saying that he's probably a sell high, probably one of the bigger sell highs in fantasy right now, because the separation marks weren't there. Yes, he earned more targets than he usually does, but I'm just not totally bought in on Keon Coleman right now. I didn't see a vastly different player than the one that we saw last year. It's just that Josh Allen really just force-fed him the ball. Again, kudos to Keon Coleman. He looks better than he did in year one, but I do think he'll probably have a tough matchup against Sauce in this one. Garrett Wilson also expected to see shadow coverage from Christian Benford. Let's see how he continues that momentum. If Justin Fields plays well, I think Garrett Wilson's going to absolutely crush his ADP on a season-long perspective. Dalton Kincaid versus the Jets defense. Not a great route participation for Dalton Kincaid, but when he's on the field, he gets used. And I think that's an underrated thing with tight ends is, yes, we want tight ends who run 90% of the routes, but sometimes you run 90% of the routes and you don't get used. Dalton Kincaid, when he's on the field, gets used. So I actually really like him as a decent streamer in this matchup. And then both kickers, Matt Prater and then the Jets kicker and the Bills defense definitely in play for this one, because I do think Justin Fields is prone to mistakes and that kind of thing. This next game, also not a very high scoring, exciting game. You have the Steelers and Seahawks. Steelers are 3-point home favorites. Over under of just 40 points. The over actually catching a little bit of the steam. Pace of play is actually up there. And then both the offenses look decent. In week one, I would say the Steelers defense not looking very decent is why the Seahawks have a DVOA advantage more so than the Seahawks offense looking good. I wouldn't play either of these quarterbacks. I know Rodgers had 4 touchdowns in week one. Not really trusting him here unless I see more of that. Jaylen Warren is a flex option because he's the starting running back, but Gainwell was heavily involved in week one. And then Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. A lot of people are going to be wondering what to do with this backfield. I would say that Walker is still my preference of the two running backs who I'm starting. Walker came into the season banged up a little bit. Maybe that first quarter of play where Charbonnet was the lead back is a mirage, and we look back on this 5 weeks from now and we go, yeah, Kenneth Walker is exactly who we thought he was. For now, temper expectations, start him as like maybe a low-end RB2, and I do think that Charbonnet needs to be closely behind him as like a high-end RB3. That's how I view these guys. It's not a great game environment overall. DK Metcalf going against his former team. We'll see his former probably guy that he went up against in practice every day in Tariq Woolen in shadow coverage. These guys are going to know each other very well, and I actually think advantage Woolen in that situation. He's got the size and the athleticism to match DK Metcalf physically. JSN versus the Pittsburgh secondary. He might have another 10-plus targets, so he's absolutely in your lineup. If you're looking for streamers, I think that both kickers absolutely in play here, and then Steelers defense definitely in play here as well. Sam Darnold is always capable of throwing pick sixes and that kind of thing. Los Angeles Rams going to Tennessee. Minus 5.5 point road favorites for the Rams here. 41.5 point over under. Again, not a very exciting game environment. Pace to play is very slow. Both quarterbacks below average matchups. Don't start Cam Ward or Matthew Stafford if you can help it. Both running backs are going to be in your lineup given the workloads that they have, but I don't think either of them are going to be particularly efficient. This game might scream exactly what we saw from the Texans and the Rams last week, which is like, 15-9 or something like that. I don't think this game is going to be very high scoring. Kyron Williams, Tony Pollard, these guys are in your lineup simply due to their workload. Puka Nacua, absolutely in your lineup every single week because he's a stud, and Devontae Adams going to be in your lineup. I would be interested to see, because we saw before Derek Stingley kind of got banged up in that game, that he was going to primarily be on Devontae Adams. Do the Titans deploy a L'Jarius Sneed type on Devontae Adams most of the game and then look to limit Puka Nacua with the rest of their defense? I think that's probably how they're going to play things. We'll see how that one looks in practice. Calvin Ridley had the Patrick Surtain treatment last week, so I think this matchup will be a lot easier for him. I would say, I'm not excited about buying Calvin Ridley in this Tennessee Titans offense, but I would be interested to see after week 2, what do we think of Calvin Ridley? Is he another high target, no efficiency type of guy, or does he start to look a little bit better? Because Cam Ward, given the circumstances against Denver on the road in your first game, I thought he looked pretty decent. And if Cam Ward plays like that against a little bit easier matchup here in the Rams, who also have a very good front but are a generally a worse defense than the Broncos. I do think this one could be interesting. This one's also in Tennessee, which makes it a little bit easier for Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley to get things done. I wouldn't be excited about streaming Chigakonkwo, but he did run over 80% of the routes, so I think you could do worse if you're down bad at tight end. And then I would stream the Rams defense and kicker because I do think they can get some things done in this one. Moving into the 4 p.m. window, and unfortunately we only have 3 games, which I don't love when they just front load the 1 p.m. window and don't have a lot of games in the 4 p.m. window. I'm actually going to be doing a tasting for my my wedding. We got to taste our menu here, so I'm actually going to miss a large portion of this window, unfortunately. But I'll go back and Game Pass all these games. Cardinals are 6.5-point home favorites against the Carolina Panthers. Bryce, man, we got to see a better game out of you, brother, because that was a rough showing in Jacksonville. Hopefully it's week one. Week one lies at times. It was an on and off, weather delay type of game. Over under of just 43.5 points. The under catching a little bit of steam right now. Pace of play is about league average. Moving into exactly who I would start in this game, you have Kyler Murray, of course, is going to be in your lineup. This is a great matchup for him. He's at home versus a Carolina Panthers defense that is exploitable. Don't start Bryce Young. You can't start him right now until we see him play better. Both running backs, though, top 6 matchups. So James Conner and Chuba Hubbard, both top 15 running backs for me on the week, absolutely need to be in your lineup. There is not many running backs I would start over those 2 guys given their workloads and given the matchups that they have on the ground. Tedero McMillan and Marvin Harrison Jr., good matchups. One thing I'm curious about, the Panthers have a young cornerback by the name of J.C. Horn. They have used him in shadow coverage before. When you have a clear number 1 wide receiver coming into town like Marvin Harrison Jr. with no other good wide receivers on the offense, does J.C. Horn travel with Marvin Harrison Jr.? Same can be said for Will Johnson, the rookie cornerback for the Cardinals, who looked great in his debut. Are they going to stick him on Tedero McMillan and let him travel there? So keep in mind those receivers maybe have a little bit down performances given the matchups that they might have. Trey McBride, of course, is in your lineup, and he has the easiest matchup of any tight end on the week. So this could be the nuclear Trey McBride game. If you guys are looking to make an upgrade at tight end, I would say go do it before this game because Trey McBride could have a monster performance. And then I am streaming the Arizona Cardinals defense and kicker all day, every day in this game. Moving into Broncos at Colts, this one's going to be an interesting matchup. What do these quarterbacks look like? Does Daniel Jones continue that momentum? Does Bo Nix play better than he played against the Titans in week 1? Pace of play combined is the highest on the slate. So there should be a lot of offensive plays in this one, and I do feel comfortable starting Bo Nix, even despite the road matchup against a pretty decent defense. I would not start Daniel Jones if I can help it because the Broncos are the Broncos, but both guys are actually in decent shape for a decent matchup here. Both running backs, top 8 matchups. Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins. Jonathan Taylor, of course, I got an RB1, so he's in your lineup, but J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, for that matter, both viable flex plays. Of the 2 of them, I still prefer Dobbins because I think the workload still favors him. But we did hear a report from Zach Stevens, who works for the team and covers the team, did say that they want to get R.J. Harvey more involved. So keep an eye on that workload. Does that continue from the week 1 usage, or does R.J. Harvey continue to inch his way forward into that backfield? Michael Pittman Jr. probably going to see Patrick Surtain. Not a good matchup for him. This is the game. Josh Downs, you got to get in the game here because last week, what he played 60% of the snaps. He was coming off a hamstring injury from camp, so that could be part of it. But I want to see him run more routes in this one. I want to see him get more targets in this one because Michael Pittman is probably going to be taken out of the game entirely. So if Josh Downs doesn't perform well, I'm going to be really concerned about a guy that I have bags of and a guy that I really liked coming into the season. I want to see him on the field, have a 6+, 7, 8+ target game because you have the best matchup of the wide receiver core. Cortland Sutton versus the Indianapolis secondary should be a pretty decent matchup for him, so he's going to be in your lineup. Tyler Warren, every week starter at tight end going forward. Every week he's in your lineup no matter his matchup. And then Evan Ingram, who is practicing, who looks like he's going to be ready for this game, probably in your lineup if you have him still, because we do see that he is probably one of the top target earners on this team. And then Will Lutz definitely in your lineup as a kicker. Denver defense, because they're the Denver defense, always in play there. Moving into probably the game of the 4 p.m. window for sure, maybe even the game of the week. Super Bowl rematch, Philadelphia Eagles traveling to Arrowhead to face the Kansas City Chiefs. This one's flip-flopped a little bit because everybody goes, oh my God, Patrick Mahomes is giving points at home. And then it flopped to the Chiefs being favored by 1 point, and it's flopped back and forth to the Eagles being favored by 1 point. Over under of 47. 2 good offenses, 2 good quarterbacks, probably going to be a lot of points, hopefully in this game, but both defenses are capable of putting up a nice performance as well. The DVOA favors the offensive performance of these 2 teams. So I would say that if I lean somewhere in this game, it would probably be on the over. You're going to be starting Jalen Hurts. You're going to be starting Patrick Mahomes. Absolutely no concerns there. Both running backs have bad matchups. So pass funnel defenses for both of these teams, I don't think this is the game where Isaiah Pacheco gets right unless the game stays close and they can just give him a lot of volume and that kind of thing. I am worried about what Isaiah Pacheco's value looks like after this game because if it's another Kareem Hunt game, because they can't run the ball and they're throwing the ball out of the backfield. I am going to be worried for the flock league where I have Isaiah Pacheco, and I'm actually going up against Kareem Hunt because Nathan has no RB2 this week, and he's starting Kareem Hunt against me. Saquon Barkley, Steve Spagnuolo did a good job of containing him. I would expect Saquon probably not to have a great game again. So if you have Barkley, he's going to need a long run, or he's going to need some receptions to help carry him, probably find the end zone because he's Barkley. But efficiency-wise, I don't expect a monster 200-plus yard rushing day. A.J. Brown versus Trent McDuffie in shadow coverage. This is the Devontae Smith game. Devontae Smith has to have a good game in this one. Otherwise, I'm going to start to get a little bit worried about him because you have McDuffie taking away an injured and hobbled A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith needs to have 100 yards in this game, needs to have a good performance, and I absolutely love him as a starter this week. If you have Devontae Smith, make sure he's in your lineup. Xavier Worthy is practicing. Now, I don't know what that means long-term, but if he plays in this game, you probably got to play him as at least a flex option. Now, if he doesn't play in this game, which I think is probably the more likely outcome, you got to play Hollywood Brown as a solid flex option. So make sure that he is in your lineup if Xavier Worthy is out. Kelsey, especially if Worthy is out for this game, got to be in your lineup. And then Dallas Goedert, if he's playing, because he wasn't practicing yesterday as I'm recording this on Friday morning, definitely keep an eye on him. If he is playing, he's definitely a good option. And then both kickers need to be in your lineup as well. Moving into Sunday Night Football, J.J. McCarthy is getting shoved down our throats by the national media here. Minnesota Vikings hosting the Atlanta Falcons. Two quarterbacks, again, matched up from the 2024 NFL Draft. We have the Vikings favored by 3.5 points. The over-under set at 44.5 in this one. Pace of play, third highest on the slate. I think J.J. McCarthy is a very good streamer here. It's in a dome. Atlanta Falcons have a pass funnel defense. Bijan Robinson, of course, in your lineup every single week. Drake London in your lineup every single week. I like the matchup for both Bijan and for Drake London on the other side, which makes me like the Vikings guys even more because even though Justin Jefferson's slated to see A.J. Terrell in shadow coverage, it's Justin Jefferson. I don't give a shit who's covering him because he's Justin Jefferson. And then Michael Penix, I want to say he's a decent start this week, but the Vikings can confuse a young quarterback. We saw it with Caleb Williams in the second half of that game. Brian Flores can dial up a really good game plan, especially in a primetime matchup. I worry about Michael Penix, but I do feel great about Bijan, and I do feel great about London. If you have Darnell Mooney, I probably wouldn't start him in this game because he's coming off of a multi-week injury. He missed most of camp. So if you have Darnell Mooney, you probably want to leave him on the bench and see what he does. And then TJ Hawkinson, you're going to be starting because he's an every week starting tight end. And I do think you can stream Kyle Pitts in this game as well. So I like London and Pitts and Bijan, but I don't love Penix, which is kind of an oxymoron of fantasy football there. But I do think we're going to see this game just be targets, receptions, that kind of thing. Whereas I do think the Vikings can take care of business and probably win that game outright. Texans hosting the Buccaneers on the first game of Monday Night Football. This one's 7 p.m. Eastern kickoff. I don't love this matchup for my Buccaneers. I really don't because the Texans have an excellent front. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. If Tristan Wirfs isn't playing in this game, because it does sound like both Tristan Wirfs and Godwin are capable of playing, but week 3, week 4 is what the timeline has been told to me as a Buccaneers fan this entire time. So I don't think he'll be ready, either of them, for this game. That means Graham Barton, the center, is going to be playing left tackle again. Mike Jordan, who's like our off-the-bench interior line depth, he's going to be playing left guard. Ben Bredesen playing center. So shuffled offensive line versus Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. Not a good situation for Baker Mayfield. I would sit Baker Mayfield. If you guys have him, don't play him. He's on the road in Houston going up against a great front. If Wirfs is playing, that's a different story. But if Wirfs is not out there, I would sit Baker Mayfield for Trevor Lawrence, J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams, Drake May. Those type of quarterbacks I would play over Baker Mayfield this week. C.J. Stroud, however, who I would actually play if I had the decision between the two of these quarterbacks over Baker Mayfield, performed super well against us his rookie season and absolutely cooked our defense. So I know he can handle a Todd Bowles scheme. And 2, I think we're going to have a problem with Nico Collins in this game. So Nico Collins probably get right game for him. And then Mike Evans, of course, going to see shadow coverage from Derek Stingley, which means Emeka Egbuka is probably slated to have another great game. Now, again, Chris Godwin was not ruled out for this game. He practiced on Thursday, which on a Monday night game is the first practice of the week. So that actually bodes well for Chris Godwin coming back soon. Will it be this game? I don't think so. I think it'll be week 3 or week 4 against the Jets or the game after that. But Emeka Egbuka's time as the clear number 2 receiver here might be coming to a close pretty soon, even though Godwin's going to take a little bit of time to ramp up. Keep that in mind for Emeka Egbuka. He's still in my lineup right now, even if Godwin plays. Nick Chubb, if you need to play a flex starter, I think is fine. Bucky Irving, probably a rough matchup for him, especially if Wirfs is not playing. If Wirfs is playing, that obviously upgrades Bucky too. So hopefully we get Wirfs back for this game. I think both kickers, I mean, Kaimi Fairbairn's one of the best fantasy kickers there is. Chase McLaughlin had a tough week last week, missing some field goals and stuff, but I like him in this game because I think the Texans defense is going to hold in the red zone and result in us taking some field goals. Houston defense also in play for sure. Moving into the Chargers and Raiders, East Coast unks down tremendously with a 10 p.m. Eastern kickoff for this game. Chargers are 3.5-point road favorites, over under of 46.5 points, the over catching the most steam of any game on the slate. So keep that in mind. This game could be a shootout, could be a lot of scoring involved. Chargers, Justin Herbert, he's got to be in your lineup. The way he played against the Chiefs, you got to put him in your lineup every single week right now. Ashton Genty should have a tough matchup again. So I would say this week I wasn't talking about Ashton Genty as a great buy low. And the reason for that was because I thought he'd be a better buy low after week 2. So that's where I'm at with Ashton Genty. I think he'll probably have another 45-yard rushing day. Hopefully he finds the end zone like he did last week. Hopefully he doesn't find the end zone, honestly, because I don't have a lot of Ashton Genty and I would like to go trade for him. So Genty, temper your expectations because he didn't look overly efficient against the Patriots in week 1. And I don't think he'll look efficient in this game. Ladd McConkey, absolutely in your starting lineup. I was more encouraged with what I saw from Justin Herbert than I was discouraged than from what I saw from Keenan Allen QJ in regards to Ladd McConkey. I view Ladd McConkey as actually a better option than I viewed him before because of how much they pass the ball. Number 1 in pass rate over expectation in week 1 and way higher than we all anticipated. So great news for Ladd McConkey. Yes, Keenan Allen's a flex option. Maybe you could throw QJ out there because of the matchup, because of the game environment. But Ladd McConkey, man, if you can buy low on him right now, absolutely go ahead and do it because he had opportunities to legitimately have 25 fantasy points in that game. Justin Herbert missed him on a fingertip grab in the end zone. He was also open on pretty much all of his routes. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a wide receiver buy low right now who has legitimate top 5 upside. Ladd McConkey, absolutely one of those guys. Jacoby Myers probably in your lineup. Don't start Geno Smith because this defense is legit. Brock Bowers popped up on the injury report, but again, Monday game. So it's a Thursday injury practice, basically a Wednesday injury report, and he wasn't practicing. Keep an eye on the injury report today on Friday and tomorrow on Saturday. I'm sure Brock Bowers will be just fine. He said he was just going to be fine coming into that game. And then Los Angeles Chargers defense, absolutely a streaming defense that I'm willing to do this week. I'm in fact actually streaming them in the Flock League. And then Cameron Dicker, the Chargers kicker, definitely the guy that you can roll out there at the kicking position. I didn't get to this segment last week, but we are going to cover the streaming quarterbacks, streaming tight ends, streaming defenses, and streaming kicker options that I like the most. Now, for streaming quarterbacks and tight ends, I'm going to try and lean away from guys that are guaranteed top 10 to 12 options for me so that these are guys that maybe are available on your waiver wire, on your bench, something like that. Streaming quarterbacks I love. Bo Nix this week, get right game against the Colts. I think he's going to be back to his usual stuff. I had him as a top 8 quarterback entering the season. I think he will reestablish himself this week. Trevor Lawrence going up against the Bengals. High scoring game environment. Love him this week as well. CJ Stroud, like I said, going up against the Buccaneers. Easy exploitable matchup for CJ Stroud. He's performed well against them before, and I do think schematically they're going to present some disadvantages for us. Our defensive line, I think, is not as good as the Rams, so I'm not as worried about the Texans' offense crumbling the way it did against the Rams because of the offensive line shuffle and all that kind of stuff. So CJ, like him as a streamer this week. Caleb Williams, like I said, you got to treat this guy like Kyler Murray. Going up against the Detroit Lions, what would you do with Kyler Murray against the Detroit Lions? You'd be putting him in your lineup. So that is exactly what I'm doing with Caleb Williams. And then JJ McCarthy, good game environment in a dome against the Atlanta Falcons. It's a pass funnel defense. Very good streaming option. This is the order in which I would stream them. So if multiple guys are available here, whoever is ranked higher here, Bo Nix, Trevor Lawrence, Stroud, Caleb Williams, JJ McCarthy, that is how I would stream those guys. Streaming tight end, Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, Brenton Strange, Hunter Henry, and Harold Fannin, who I'm sure a lot of you guys picked up on the waiver wire. That is the order in which I would stream them. Ferguson, great matchup. Pitts, great game environment. Brenton Strange, great game environment as well. Hunter Henry, again, I think the Patriots could win that game, and I think Hunter Henry could be a big part of it. Harold Fannin, given the usage you saw last week, absolutely in play. Streaming defenses, streaming kickers, Baltimore Ravens against the Browns, pretty self-explanatory. Los Angeles Rams going up against the Titans, pretty self-explanatory. Arizona Cardinals going up against the Panthers at home. Bryce Young basically threw a pick 6 last week and it didn't count. Pittsburgh Steelers against the Seahawks. Again, it's Sam Darnold and they're at home. Love that game environment for the Steelers defense. And then the 49ers on the road against New Orleans is a little bit sketchy because, like I said, I think that the 49ers could actually lose that game to New Orleans. But probably going to be like a 12-10 scoring game. Without Brock Purdy on the 49ers side and with Spencer Rattler operating the offense for the Saints, I do think the 49ers are in play there. And then Will Lutz, the Denver kicker, absolutely in play against the Colts. Very good kind of kicker matchup for him. Colts and Broncos also kind of screams like a 20-17 game with lots of field goals. Kaimi Fairbairn, excellent matchup against the Buccaneers. We're kind of a bend, don't break type of defense, so I think they're going to have no problem moving the ball between the 20s, but we might stiffen up in the red zone, and that could result in 3-4 field goals for Kaimi Fairbairn, and we know they trust him from 50+, so great option for you guys there. Evan McPherson, great game environment for the Bengals and Jaguars. Chase McLaughlin, I think he'll bounce back in this game against the Texans. And Matt Prater, Bills-Jets, high-scoring game environment. Bills kicker Matt Prater looked really good in week 1. I think he can continue that momentum. So this was Matchups That Matter. I went through every single game minus Thursday Night Football and broke down all the guys I'm starting, sitting, flexing, game environments, all that good stuff. If you guys got some value from this, leave it down below in the comments. Really appreciate it. If you are new around here, hit the subscribe button. About 40% of you guys that watch these videos are subscribed. The other 60% of you guys, I don't know what you're doing. It's free to do. Hit the subscribe button. Ask any start set questions down below. I can promise you guys this, for the next 3-4 hours that this video is live, I will answer every start set question that I can for free pro bono in the comment section. After that, we have other videos coming out and it might be a little bit more challenging, but if you get to this video early and you ask your question early, I can probably help you out with it. So leave it down below. And of course, if you don't want to get my opinion on weekly start sets, you just want to be on your merry way, you can get our weekly start set rankings, which are always up to date, over on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up, and you'll get a free team review if you sign up annually, but you'll also get 30% off and a 7-day free trial for using that promo code FSE. Get weekly start set rankings, rest of season rankings, trade calculator use, My Team's feature use, some of the best tools out there, legitimately. The My Team's feature in the trade calculator, every week when I'm sending out offers, it is the single best tool that I personally use in fantasy football. So make sure you guys have access to that. You can get the season pass still. $34 will cover you from now until the rest of the season. Weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, and all those tools. So check that out if you guys are interested. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new around here. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.